Hello. I'm making this at 2 in the morning, but I'm pretty happy. My draft ended in a day, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about it in a bit. This is my draft pick for the third Emerald Open. For those not in the know, I am a big Gen 3 Pokemon fan. I've played a lot of Gen 3 things, and this is a new one for me. It is a draft league format. What that means is that since there's so few Pokemon in Gen 3 compared to future generations, the draft is done, in pools of 8. So it was me and 7 other people. We could, take turns picking out the Pokemon we needed, build a team. We had a budget, how many points we had. If you count all the points, that adds up to 90. Very, very fun stuff. And I want to take some time to briefly go over my team, my ideas, my composition, what went through my head as I was making some of these picks, um, and also try and convince myself that hey, you know, I didn't get such a bad team after all, despite hindsight being 2020. No, let's start. Hold on. All right. First off, we've got Skarmory. Um, the reason I went Skarmory over my first potential pick, um, which would have been Metagross, I was third in my draft, which meant that I would have had the third pick for what sort of mon I would get first. However, the person right before me picked Metagross, which is a bit unfortunate, but that immediately made me think, well, I was going to use Metagross as my rock resist, or rather my defensive linchpin, because Metagross is also really offensively potent, and I wanted to sort of leverage its amazing defensive and offensive utilities. So I figured, okay, well, what else will be able to fill that defensive niche? And my first thought was Skarmory. I, I'll be very honest, I'm not a very defensive player. And you can look at my draft and see, oh, well, hey, this man is self-contradictory. And honestly, you're kind of right. Um, but it'll eventually work out, and you'll see why in a bit. But anyways, Skarmory. Skarmory is really good in vanilla. It has Master's Defense. Steel Flying is a really good defensive typing. It gets spikes. You can run Toxic, Protect. It gets Drill Peck if you want offense. You can even run Hidden Power Ground if you want to, snipe Magneton. That's why I've got Verdant Turf playing in the background. The money got different and all that. But that just depends on what I'm facing. Otherwise, Skarmory is a really good all-arounder in terms of defensive utility. It could potentially run offense, although, again, why would you do that when you have a perfectly good Skarmory? So, that's my quick analysis on Skarmory. And yeah, no, it's also just a really good pick. Really top choice. Very, very solid. Not a bad mon to build a team around, I will say. And you'll see why in a bit. So, next up, I chose Blissey. Hold on a second. Maybe this is a bit too loud. Verdant Turf is very muted regardless, but this could be, a bit more overwhelming. So, Blissey. If I go Skarmory, then the next logical choice has to be Blissey. Right? There's no other way of putting it. You have Skarmory, then the next mon you think of is Blissey. Blissey is a blob. It is monstrously specially defensive. It takes a few physical hits. I mean, it does have a base defense of 10, but a base HP of 255. So you usually see bold Blissey with maxed out plus defense, which isn't really bad. All things considered, because it also gets Soft Boil for reliable recovery, and a plethora of other options. It gets Thunder Wave, Seismic Toss, Ice Beam. You could even run a Combine set if you felt like it. You could run Aromatherapy. It really is just a very, very solid, again, all around your defensive mon, and it's not bad. it really isn't that bad. I think those two by themselves are a really good pick. But I figured, hey, you know what? I'm gonna need a bit of a, you know, offense of my own to back up my defense. Which leads us into our third pick of Blaziken. Now, you might be thinking, Blaziken? Doesn't that defeat both Skarmory and Blissey? And you're right. Blaziken is notorious for being one of the few mons with not just one, but two stabs. And not just like, coverage moves that defeat both Skarmory and Blissey, which is really nice for going up against other Scar and Bliss teams. It is also just really good in terms of being my fighting type. Base 80 speed's really nice against the things it wants to outspeed. And, I could run a bulky, I guess, but it's usually meant to be a mixed attacker of sorts because it also gets, fire type moves. And, you could run Thunder Punch. You could run, I believe it gets Rock Slide. You can also run, any of the hidden powers. HP Grass, HP Swampert. And it's pretty nice. I feel very glad with my third three picks so far. I know I'm not going as in depth as some other people do, but this is just sort of my thought process as I was going through. And then next choice, I have a bit more to talk about, mostly because you might be seeing it and being like, oh, that's a bit out of place, isn't it? Well, you'd be kind of right in that regard. So my fourth pick is Blastoise, and you might be seeing it in regards to its point value and thinking, oh, well, that's a very interesting pick. I see you have a few higher ranked picks, down the line. I wonder why you picked Blastoise right then and there. If I've got a spiker and a really good one at that, that means other people are going to have good spikers. And I needed a rapid spinner. And who better to do rapid spin than a Pokemon like Blastoise? Because it also fulfills my role as a bulky water. I really need a real fire resist, a really just good defensive linchpin. You might notice that I don't exactly have any raw rock resist, but Blastoise is probably as close as it gets in terms of tanking and retaliating against most Pokemon with rock type attacks, like Tyranitar, Aerodactyl, Salamence, I guess. And it just does really well. I would say it's pretty cool. And it also gets Refresh in case, you have toxic spammers on the other side. Overall, very, very solid mon. I personally think this is just a sleeper pick. Now, next one's very, very interesting because I wasn't originally intending it. But this pick is Dusclops, and the reason it is Dusclops and not something like Gligar, because initially I was going to go Gligar as my offensive mon. However, I eventually realized, oh, well, hey. Why am I not going to go for something like, say, a defensive mon? I was talking to LRXC about my draft, and, well, he said, oh, hey, you don't have a defensive mon yet. You should totally go for something like Dusclops. And obviously it was going to be either Dusclops or Mischievous, and that sort of bites me in the ass, but I'll elaborate on that in a bit. The reason I choose Dusclops over Mischievous, oh, well, Mischievous has Levitate. You can fly over things like Aerodactyl and be immune to half of its move kit. You could be, ground immune, which is huge for a defensive mod. And I'm like, yeah, well, I also have Skarmory, first off. And Dusclops is very important since it gets Will-O-Wisp, which cripples lots of physical attackers. It cripples a lot of slower stuff too, which means that, I can afford to, stay healthy, stall them out, pressure and all that. Again, this is definitely not my play style. I was just sort of picking up things as I was going along. And, yeah, no. And then, you can sort of see, like, one of my plans falls apart in a bit. Because Alakazam got sniped. I was initially planning to go for Alakazam, and, past me should have realized, well, hey, it was either going to be Alakazam and Mischievous, or Dusclops and Espeon. Now, the reason I choose Espeon over a Pokemon like Jolteon is that Blaziken already fulfills my ground weak special attacker role, which means, hey, I don't want any overlap in terms of ground weakness. My team already has a ton to take care of. And, Espeon's also just really, really interesting on its own. Can run a Calm Mindset, can run Baton Pass, it can make it pseudo Jolteon, run 2 offensive moves in Stab and a Hidden Power, run Toxic, and then Baton Pass for the little Dry Pass action. It can also pass, Calm Minds of its own, which is very, very interesting. I just think that this is a very cool mod, and more specifically, it is a mod that takes advantage of spikes being down in an offensive manner, which is always very, very nice. Then it's just beneficial that it's also a pivot, and it has 110 base speed, probably the fastest thing I wanted on this draft in that case, since Dugtrio was also there, and I really didn't want Dugtrio. Again, I'm just alluding to a few things down the line, right? Alrighty then. Next up is Shelgon, and this is a mod I had planned for a really, really, really long time. At least in terms of me in my initial stages of like, White 8 mods would work really, really cool. And this is because Shelgon, despite being, 5 points, has a lot of really interesting merits to it. Base 100 defense, base 95 attack is absolutely nothing to sneeze at for a mod of this cost. It also gets many, many good moves and many good options to go with it. It gets Rockhead Double Edge for its primary offensive option. It gets Dragon Dance if you feel like boosting. Or you could go for a Choice Band avenue. It also gets Rock Slide in the offensive department, as well as Brick Break. And if I need, an Earthquake-like move, it doesn't get Earthquake. Not yet, at least. You have to wait until it becomes Salamence to do that. But I can run Hidden Power Ground to do those sorts of things. So I can run it as sort of a pseudo Salamence in that sense. It also gets Wish, which is really, really nice. I can run a set like Toxic, Wish Protect, and then an offensive move, probably Flamethrower to hit them steals. But otherwise, I think that this was a very, very solid pick, very all-arounder, sort of what I was looking for. More specifically, I was told that I needed a really solid physical breaker. I already had Blaziken, and I already had potentially Dusclops. Dusclops doesn't really count, but I was thinking like, maybe I should go Dusclops. And in retrospect, a few mons I could have chosen, other than Alakazam, was Claydol. Claydol could have worked really nicely. However, I was really adamant about picking Blastoise, and I think, even though I enjoy Claydol, could have had a Boomer on my team, I really believe that, I can definitely make this work. I believe I'm a guy who can cook, and I believe Shelgon will be, the Jesse Pinkman to my Walter White in this sense. We're going to cook up something. And then we get to the goofy little lad, Trapinch. Now, I have 3 points left over. Initially, my last mod was going to be Voltorb, as Voltorb has really solid speed, base 100, it gets Boom, gets T-Wave, and all that. And that was going to be, sort of speed control-y, maybe, I don't know. But then, I figure, hey, I like Trapinch. Trapinch sort of doesn't mind being in this sort of team array, and it offers a good amount of firepower, so why not draft it? Ground type, Arena Trap, higher attack than Dog. That Choice Band set is looking really, really nice. But yeah, no, I guess I don't have anything else at this point, so that's just sort of my summary of my draft. Be sure to let me know if I definitely missed anything. I'll leave a link to the draft spreadsheet in the description. But otherwise, yeah, have a good day, night, whatever you're doing. My computer's about to explode, so I'm about to sign off.